Ladies and gentlemen, look at Kong, the eighth wonder of the world.
What's good, everybody? It's CocoPop430 here, and welcome back to another monster ranking video. Man, what can be said about the granddaddy of giant monster movies himself, King Kong? King Kong is a staple in not only American culture, but across the globe as well. And seeing his resurgence into popularity thanks to the Monsterverse, I felt it was only necessary to rank each Kong movie from worst to best. Although King Kong doesn't have the lengthy filmography Godzilla has, King Kong is all about quality, not quantity, and I'm sure I'll have a much more exciting time rewatching these movies again than I did for my Gamma ranking video. Also, if you haven't watched that yet, I would highly recommend watching it after this video. Can the eighth wonder of the world show why he deserves to be in the same echelon of Godzilla? Let's find out together, shall we? Also, yes, spoilers ahead, we're discussing these films, so if you haven't watched them yet, you've been warned. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, and let's get this video up to 50 likes to celebrate King Kong, and let's get started with the ranking video.
If you're Patrick, then who's that? A real gorilla? Huh?
You know, I surprisingly had trouble deciding which King Kong movie was the worst. Both of these movies were their own doors to hell for their own reasons, but when boiling it down, although I hate Son of Kong more, King Kong Lives was the first movie I can recall renting from my local Hollywood video and forming my first conscious opinion when it comes to viewing movies. I remember as a 5 to 6 year old kid watching these movies with my brother, and we both agreed that King Kong Lives made us feel nothing. This movie is atrocious. It is awful. I mean, considering that I sat down in theaters to watch Teacher's Pet the movie and Dougal, my brain hadn't developed yet to form opinions on trash movies, but for some reason, King Kong Lives opened up my 8th gate of thought like the GOAT my guy did against Madara Uchiha, and I was able to finally realize that these movies were kinda trash. I would love to show footage for this film, but when I attempted to search for DVD copies of this film on Amazon, it cost nearly $50 to buy. For this shitty movie, $50? That's outrageous.
$300? That's outrageous.
And the Blu-ray version that is only $26 can't be played on North American Blu-ray players. Who the hell distributed this shitty movie? I mean, look at this. It can't be distributed or watched in North Korea, Southeast Asia, Japan, North, Central, and South America. I mean, what is this movie? Is this movie banned for some reason? I have no idea. Lives is such a weird movie, as it's supposed to be a sequel to the 1976 King Kong with the Big Lebowski, but instead of being a few years after the original, this movie was released a whole 10 years after the first one. Yes, King Kong Lives was released in 1986. How the hell were they able to keep King Kong alive for nearly a decade when he got shot up by the military and fell off the Twin Towers? How's that even possible? The actual reason why this movie took forever to make was because there was an ongoing legal battle for the actual rights of King Kong, which meant no more Kong movies until all that legal trouble was settled. The explanation for Kong's long-awaited return is the fact that Kong has been in a coma after being resurrected by Dr. Amy Franklin, played by Linda Hamilton, who I didn't know from the first Terminator movie, so it was really funny finally watching that movie literally a decade later and recognizing her from King Kong Lives. My only problem with this character is, why does she want to keep King Kong alive? If she had any relation to one of the main characters during the first movie, then I would understand that maybe Jeff Bridges knew her and begged her to help keep King Kong alive, since he was a primate paleontologist in the 76 movie. I have no idea what they were doing. I guess we aren't allowed to attempt to add proper lore to the sequel. Silly me. For that matter, why does anyone want to keep King Kong alive? We saw how much damage he did during the original. We saw the military and everyone else wanting him dead. So now why all of a sudden are doctors and other businessmen so desperate to keep not only King Kong alive, but to get him a new heart? I mean, what are we doing here? Did anyone learn anything from the first movie? Am I the only one here with some goddamn sense around here? So this surgeon for 10 years has been keeping Kong alive. However, complications arise when they attempt to add the new heart, only for King Kong to be in a coma for so long that they need new blood from another Kong to keep him alive, which is impossible since King Kong is the last of his species. So now they have to find another Kong to supply the blood. I mean, the odds of finding a new Kong are sure to be impossible, right? I mean, for nearly a decade they weren't able to find another one, so it makes them sure they could find oh my god, another Kong is alive in Borneo. And it's a female? Wow, what are the odds? I'm so glad director John Guillermin was able to create the Femme Kong MacGuffin to save Kong from the brink of death. 7 minutes into the movie. Yes, this movie rushes by fast. The operating scene is honestly crazy. There's so much blood squirting out everywhere, and at least John Connor's mom was able to save Kong and potentially save a species with the introduction of a female Kong. But since King Kong has a love interest, now we have to do the same with the main characters. I mean, what can I say about these two characters? They're pretty bland and just try to focus away from the romance between King Kong and his lady, which, for the most part, I thought was cute, and something that we haven't seen out of King Kong, and haven't seen since, to be honest. Although a lot of characters in this movie are forgettable, the one standout performer in this movie is Lieutenant Colonel Archie Nevitt, played by John Ashton. His performance as the Army Colonel, hell-bent on destroying Kong and his newfound love, is so over-the-top and goofy that I couldn't help but laugh at how much he was having fun when acting in this movie. He knew that this movie was going to be a steamy pile of trash, so he pulled a Shawn Michaels against Hulk Don't Google Me Hogan during their SummerSlam match back in 2005 and just oversold everything in this movie. But I think the funniest thing about this film, when researching it, is the fact that the entertainment group responsible for publishing and distributing this movie refused to give any clips of the new movie to Siskel and Ebert unless they only aired it on their local Chicago show, and wrote a letter agreeing to not show any of the footage on their national broadcast.
Our next movie in 1986 is King Kong Lives, and this movie was so bad, and the studio knew it, that they did something unprecedented with Roger and me. Now, occasionally, a film company won't give us a clip to review, but usually it's a low-budget schlock film or a sleazy company. But the sequel to the entertaining 1976 King Kong should have been a classy production. That earlier film was a lot of fun, remember? Starring Jeff Bridges and Jessica Lange and the Big Ape. But this new one is so bad that the film company actually sent Roger and me letters saying they would let us show snippets of the film on our local TV shows in Chicago, only if we promised in writing not to show you the same clips on this our national show. Obviously, they were scared, and obviously, neither one of us would sign such a letter. So, no scenes from King Kong Lives. That's almost a public service. Instead, just this warning. If you don't believe me or Roger, believe the film company that, think about it, couldn't find a single scene that it wanted you to see.
I mean, wow. Wow, wow, wow. I have never heard of a company being this public about their embarrassment for creating a film. That's crazy. But in the end, yeah, this movie was embarrassing. Not as bad as Gamera Super Monster, but still worse than Godzilla vs. Gigan. Do yourself a favor and just forget this movie ever existed, okay? Like how I want to forget that I spent $2 on this movie to rent it on YouTube. That's $2 I will never get back. And I still want a refund. Long live King Kong Jr. Speaking of a certain son of Kong.
I got Donkey Kong, and now I'll get you too, Junior.
I'm Donkey Kong Jr., and that's my papa. I'm trying to save him, and boy, do I need your help.
Although King Kong Lives is technically a worse movie than Son of Kong, I just can't help myself when it comes to loathing this sad sack of a sequel. To one of the most iconic movies of all time, this is what you make right after? Really? Son of Kong is a direct sequel to the 1933 masterpiece, even coming out the same year as the original. So, the first one aired on March 2nd in New York, and on April 7th in the US, and Son of Kong was released on December 22nd. So a whole 9 months was all it took to make another sad cash grab, sequel, to King Kong. That was created by RKO Pictures and funded by, the NRA? Wow, I guess the Son of Kong considers himself a domestic terrorist now.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are all domestic terrorists.
The story takes place only a month after the events of the first movie, as Carl Denham must pay for his crimes, as he's been dealing with a plethora of lawsuits for endangered lives in New York by bringing Kong to the United States. Ironically enough, I really like this idea for a sequel. Like, what did Carl expect all this to go down? Did they expect, King Kong died by the planes, will everything going to go away? No, that's not how it works. And I thought that was a nice touch, adding a little bit of realism to this fantasy movie. I don't know why, it just, for me, it just makes complete sense that this will be the next direction. Now Carl is on the run again from the law, and decides to ditch the state and join Captain Inglehor again, who realizes that, will I get in trouble too since I had King Kong stowed away on my ship? I need to bail. I'm shocked just how fast the whole running away from the government story is dropped after they get on the boat. I would imagine the US government would be sending fleets out there to try to capture these domestic terrorists, but I guess they're too busy blaming Herbert Hoover for the Great Depression. I don't really know. It's cool seeing Robert Armstrong return for his role as Carl Denham, and his performance in this film really isn't the problem. The problem with this movie is everything else. Although the movie's runtime is an impressive 69 minutes, the movie starts to slow down when Carl and Captain Englehorn decide to run from the law and go to different ports in search for a job to pay off their impending lawsuits. The movie spends such little time on Skull Island when they finally do get back there. Although the stop motion is still pretty good, I just can't sit through the rest of the movie without feeling a huge amount of disappointment. Like, there's potential in this movie, and I feel like it could have been better. And again, I need to bring up Godzilla Raids again, as these two are basically the same type of movie. A sad, rushed sequel to an acclaimed classic. Son of Kong just sours my mood every time I have to think about it, because this movie should have worked. We have a perfect example of this with the 1949 classic Mighty Joe Young, and the effects in that movie are some of the best stop motion I have seen that even rivals the movie effects of King Kong the original. Yes, you heard me right. So if RKO had some patience and waited to develop a sequel to the 1933 movie, Son of Kong could have been one of the great monster movies that's still talked about to this day.
Fine, come on. Bomb's on his way!
The 1976 remake of King Kong kind of surprised me when watching it again. Although I haven't seen the movie in nearly a decade, I had thought at first watch that it was pretty boring. I decided that I would just prefer playing Peter Jackson's King Kong, the official game of the movie. Yes, that's the whole title, instead of watching the 70s Kong ever again. But since I wanted to do the rankings video on all the live action Kong movies, I had no choice but to rewatch it again with my brother, and for a movie I thought that was pretty boring, I realized that upon rewatch that the only main part that was really boring for me was the whole entire time they were on Skull Island. Yeah, not gonna lie, the Skull Island scenes are just really boring to get through. There's not much going on, and Kong only has 2 fight scenes when he takes Dwan. He has the log scene and when he's attacking the giant snake. That's it. Everything revolving around Skull Island just feels like one big advertisement for the beautiful landscape of Hawaii. Except when they want to use a King Kong hand that is used a lot during this film. Apparently it cost nearly $1.5 million to create this giant hand, so it makes sense why they want to use it for so many shots. The part about Skull Island really didn't surprise me. I knew back as a kid that I really didn't like these scenes and I thought they were pretty boring. The part that did surprise me was how much I enjoyed the beginning and ending sections of this movie. The mystery around Skull Island and Jeff Bridges sneaking aboard to discover a possible lost species of ape was actually enthralling, and although each character is different from the 1933 movie, I feel they still do a great job nailing their respective roles, and they do have some similar characteristics to the main cast. Instead of searching for the mysterious Skull Island to find the mystery ape within the island, Fred S. Wilson, the replacement Carl Denham played by Charles Grodin, wants to uncover the island to dig up oil for Petrox, an oil company. Yep, Wilson just wanted to dig up some oil on a random island off of the Indian Ocean. It isn't until they discover Jeff Bridges' character being a stowaway and listening in on their plan does he unveil the possibility of a mysterious giant ape-like creature living on the island. All of them at first believing it to be nothing but a hoax, but soon discover that the fabled ape was no hoax at all. The dude plays Jack Prescott in the story, a primate paleontologist who is on the expedition to discover if King Kong actually exists or not. Big Z in this story is just Jeff Bridges to me. He's charismatic and performs the role well, but we all know who the main star of the show is. His name is King Kong. Kong in this movie is more of a sympathetic creature in the story. He's a brute at first, always showing these fantastic angry faces, and I have to give this movie credit. I love how they gave Kong emotion in this story. The range of faces he makes during the movie was well done, and it really makes for a dramatic ending that will get anyone emotional. I even have to give credit to Jessica Lange in the story. She plays a great damsel of distress and even pushes Kong around at times. I mean, not literally, but you know, she attempts to stand her ground against the giant ape. You can even see over time how much she comes to care for the big guy, as all Kong wants to do is just be at peace and live on his island, which unfortunately can happen. As Wilson, and I swear, I'm trying so hard not to call him Carl Denham, you have no idea, lays a plan to lure the beast to the wall and have him slip up and fall into a pit of chloroform, knocking King Kong unconscious. The shot of King Kong breaking through the wall and seeing the giant robot hand rise out of the smoke and back down was actually amazing, especially during the mid-70s. Those are some really impressive effects. Although there is a giant robot Kong that is used, and I'm not gonna lie, yeah, it looks really bad when it's attempting to move, but I feel like it could have been better if they just kept the shots of Kong encaged with the giant robot instead of trying to flip-flop between the guy in the suit running and then the giant robot attempting to move, because you could tell how bad the scene is. It's literally night and day when you flip-flop between the two of them, and it looks really bad. I can appreciate the ingenuity and creativity shown during this movie, but sadly for King Kong 1976, a lot of the screen time is on Skull Island, which drags the movie down. The beginning had me really invested, but the middle kind of made me really bored of the movie, but the ending got me hooked right back in. It's a shame that this movie has to be ranked so low alongside Son of Kong and King Kong 2 Judgment Day, but if those movies are F tier movies, think of this as a C tier movie. Yep, I'm shocked too. It's weird for me to have Godzilla vs. Kong this low on the list. At first, when putting every Godzilla movie in a tier list, I had this movie in the middle of C tier. I thought it was a fun movie that saved the Monsterverse after non-believers let the greatest Monsterverse movie ever flop in theaters. So what the heck even happened here? Well, to be honest, it's not the movie's fault actually. I just prefer the other 6 when it comes to my Kong ranking. Although in rewatching this movie, some scenes that I did enjoy kind of fell flat for me now. The human characters in the story just don't interest me in the slightest. Like, there's no real reason why Billy Bobby Brown's band of misfits should be in this movie. Except Bernie. We all stand Bernie.
I gotta die here with you and sober!
The only interesting human character in this story is Gia. Her relationship in this story with Kong is good, and Kong's journey to find a new home while evading the pissed off radioactive lizard makes for a compelling story. Although Kong in this story is great, Godzilla gets pushed to the side a little as he's on his own side quest to discover what the humans are up to when attempting to create an ultimate mechanical apex destroyer that can eradicate every titan on the planet. Mechagodzilla 4 in the story I wish had more screen time or had more chances to fight with Godzilla and Kong, because it feels like they pulled a Batman vs Superman where they both, alongside Wonder Woman, had to work together in the end to stop Doomsday, which this is the only time I will ever talk about the DCEU because I'm glad that trash is finally buried. Please save us, James Gunn. Anyway, the fight scenes are cool, Kong's story is just interesting enough to not have you bored, and I wish they showed Godzilla more. There's not much more to it than that. I'm glad the movie was able to be financially successful to where the Monsterverse isn't slowing down anytime soon. Not my cup of tea personally, but still an okay monster flick.
Great! It's Mecha Gorillasaur! He'll destroy us all!
Step away from the giant idiot and his ugly pet turtle.
I just want to point something out before I get to my King Kong Escapes review. For some reason, I kept putting down King Kong Escapes as King Kong Lives. I have no idea why I completely mix up those two movies, because, not gonna lie, King Kong Escapes is Citizen Kane compared to King Kong Lives. King Kong Escape to Africa is based on a King Kong TV show that aired from 1966 all the way to 1969. And boy, does it feel like a cartoon brought to life with its plot. Directed by Ishiro Honda, Escapes is about an evil organization led by Doctor Who. No, not that Doctor Who. Not that Doctor Who either. Oh my god, this Doctor Who, played by Hideo Yamamoto. Doctor Who wants to obtain a highly radioactive element called Element X that's found deep in the North Pole that could bend the world to his rule. He even creates a giant robot gorilla named Mechanicon, who almost has the Element X obtained until the radiation is proving too much for the poor Mechanicon and short-circuits the mechanical beast. Now, Who must find another way to get the element, so Who devises a plan to kidnap the actual King Kong and brainwash him into doing Who's bidding. Oh my god, we keep saying Who again? Take a shot every time I said Who. Oh no. Yep, the story itself is pretty goofy, and at least in this film, the Kong suit is leagues above the suit they used in the previous Toho King Kong film, but we haven't gotten there just yet. It's odd for me to not have much to say about this film. I just thought it was really enjoyable. I mean, the Gorosaurus fight is cool, the ending fight with King Kong and Mechanicon on top of the Tokyo Tower is pretty cool as well. I mean, overall, it's just a fun, enjoyable, cartoony style live action movie, and that's basically all it is. There's not much to it than that. Bring back Mechanicon for the next Monsterverse movie.
Clear, Jack, hurry!
5th? Really? Although it is evident just how much Peter Jackson loved the original, with the countless references and nods to the 1933 classic, this movie is an insane 3 hours and 7 minutes long. King Kong is as long as Return of the King, but with that movie, it was the finale to a 10 out of 10 trilogy that tied up every loose end seamlessly. With King Kong, it's just one movie. Although I do remember Peter Jackson posting an April Fool's photo of a leaked script for Son of Kong, which would have been hilarious if it was real, but it wasn't meant to be. Sorry, Son of Kong, you may never return. And I'm just gonna say it, I really hate King Kong Lives, because for this section I wanted to use the video game footage as a little joke, as a little nod, but since I didn't have any footage I could use for King Kong Lives, since the Blu-ray didn't want to work, which is restricted, and the DVD was $50, I decided, you know what, I'm just gonna use the video game footage for that, and then add the video game footage for this section as well. So thanks, King Kong Lives, you ruined my joke. I'm not gonna lie, this is gonna be a weird little tidbit that I'm gonna talk about, but I really like the original game of the movie. Yeah, the King Kong video game is surprisingly very well done, and it is way better than some of the video game movie adaptations we were getting during that time. I mean, oh my goodness. Chucking spears at random V-Rexes and bats is really hilarious to me. It's really hilarious seeing just how fast Jack can chuck those spears. I mean, was he a javelin thrower going? I mean, my goodness, look at this. He's just chucking this shit. One thing I do love about the movie is the beginning scenes of New York City struggling to get through the Great Depression. The city feels vibrant and alive, and I thought Peter Jackson nailed the 1930s aesthetic. Although Jack Black as Carl Denham was fine, I just can't see Jack Black as anything else but the teacher from School of Rock and Kung Fu Panda. I'm sorry, I know this is during the time he attempted to take on more serious roles, but damn it, he's a comedian. That's what he was made for. The rest of the characters are also serviceable. Shout out to Coach Pat Riley for being here trying to save Anne from Kong. But the one major highlight from the movie is Kong himself. Again, Andy Serkis does a phenomenal job giving the giant silverback a personality that shines throughout this movie. Andy Serkis is a literal perfect 10 out of 10 on motion cap characters. Like 2016 playoff LeBron, he can't miss. Golem, banger. King Kong, banger. Caesar, banger. Apes together, strong. The CGI for Kong is amazing and still holds up even to this day. Although that can't be said for some of the dinosaurs on Skull Island though. The Brontosauruses and the Allosauruses in this movie do look a bit outdated, and the way they run, it did look a bit goofy at times, but the V-Rex scenes make up for that, as that's where all the budget probably went into. That whole fight scene is just spectacular. I always thought that the movie started with Jack Black in the boardroom watching his film, but it started way earlier than that. How did I forget so much about this film? Granted, last time I saw this movie, I was probably 13, but still, it was crazy seeing how many scenes I forgot growing up. I thought I was watching the extended cut. Some scenes should have been cut from the film, and some deleted scenes that were cut from the film should have made the final cut. It's hilarious to think that you could beat the game in full, watch the credits for the video game, and still have enough time to watch the final scene of the movie. This movie feels like a chore to get through at times. I can appreciate Jackson's unbridled passion for this film, and if anything, as a fan, I can commend him for his effort to create a movie that is one big love letter to the original, although it did fall short of hitting the mark. I'll give it a 6.5 out of 10. I don't know why I added numbers to this one specifically, but here you go. Release the Son of Kong cut, Peter Jackson. What are you waiting for?
No more. I'm sick of Godzilla.
What more can be said about King Kong vs. Godzilla that hasn't been said during my Godzilla tier list video? If you want a proper analysis of my thoughts on the movie, you can go there. But for now, I'm going to give a quick little summary on my thoughts about the movie. King Kong vs. Godzilla is probably the reason why we have a MonsterVerse and its 70th anniversary for Godzilla to celebrate and talk about in the first place. This movie was a major global event as it pitched Japan's greatest monster against America's greatest monster. And this movie broke box office records in Japan, and when including inflation, those records still stand to this day. This movie had a lot of iconic moments. Godzilla rising from his ice prison, the first encounter with King Kong, the final fight at Mount Fuji, King Kong getting drunk, and King Kong being delivered to Godzilla by balloon transportation. I mean, there are some iconic moments from this film. Another part that I want to point out that I didn't do a good job explaining when doing my previous ranking video was that King Kong vs. Godzilla is a funny film.
Comedy gold!
There's a lot of slapstick in this film, not just from the humans, but from the monsters as well. Ichiro Arishima plays the head of Pacific Pharmaceuticals, Mr. Takao, and he brings a great comedic factor to the film that shines through, even to the monsters. I mean, King Kong rolls into Godzilla, misses, it hits his head on a rock, giving him a concussion, or when Godzilla burns Kong and tries to clap his hands, mocking King Kong. In the scene where King Kong shoves a tree down Godzilla's throat, the movie doesn't take itself seriously and has some pure funny moments. What can I say about the amazing soundtrack created by Akira Ifukube that I wish was used in the Monsterverse? I'm shocked that the main theme wasn't at least used in one of the scenes for Godzilla vs. Kong, or even in the new Empire. Please bring back Bear McCreary, since you already have a new director for the third Godzilla Kong movie. You don't need to bring back Junkie XL. I'm just saying, Legendary. You could bring back Bear. That's all I'm gonna say. That's all I'm gonna say. One complaint I do have is the Kong suit does look bad. I mean, it sticks out like a sore thumb, and Kong at times looks ugly to look at. But to compensate, Godzilla looks great in this film, so I guess it helps balance it out. This is one of Ishiro Honda's iconic movies that has to be seen by any new kaiju fan wanting to get into the genre. A classic from the Showa era, it rightly takes its place as the 4th best King Kong film.
He has no style. He has no grace. This Kong has a funny face.
In the latest movie in the Monsterverse era, Adam Wingard returned to direct the sequel to Godzilla vs. Kong with Godzilla and Kong, The New Empire. Now, the previous Godzilla and Kong movie fell flat for me. Although far from the worst, I just don't think it holds up well in comparison to the other Monsterverse films. But when it comes to this movie, on my second watch, my opinion on this film drastically changed. When watching this movie in IMAX for the first time, I enjoyed the movie for the most part, except I did have a few complaints. I was a bit annoyed that again in this movie, Godzilla is left to the side and the main focus is on Kong. However, for this film, it actually makes so much sense when you think about it. The New Empire feels like a full circle moment for Kong, as in Skull Island, Kong had no one and was protecting the Skull Islanders from the Skull Crawlers and his home. In Godzilla vs. Kong, he gets to find a new home and live a new life in the Hollow Earth. And for the New Empire, Kong is alone in his new home, but not for long, as he discovers that his entire species, who he thought was dead mind you, has been stuck inside the Hollow Earth, forced to obey the insidious Scar King, and his controlled titan Shimo. Adam Wingard did a phenomenal job here, completing Kong's story, and although I'm sad to see him go, he did an admirable job showing the different emotions and complexities of the 8th wonder of the world. This story feels like the finale to the Kong arc we've been watching for the past 7 years. Kong finally found his family and his new home, and it might get all taken away from him if he and Godzilla can't stop this new force. I also have to give credit to the villain of the story, as at first I wasn't really vibing with Scar King. He didn't seem as intimidating as King Ghidorah, nor was he a world crisis event that they were hyping up. But the Scar King is quite the formidable foe. He is absolutely ruthless and will do anything to get the upper hand, like when he shoved the Kong into the lava when he knew that it'll make Kong retaliate and attack him. The way he's able to manipulate the others into bowing to his will and keep Shimo on a leash, it makes for an enthralling villain. The bond Zuko and Kong have is great, but I keep seeing them as Atreus and Kratos whenever they're on screen together. But that's what makes it so unique. Zuko at first tries to kill Kong on multiple occasions, and each time you think that King Kong would be sick of his shit, he doesn't attack Zuko, instead showing him compassion and making him learn that violence isn't always the answer, which were embedded into them by the Scar King. The human characters in this film are surprisingly great too, a vast improvement over GVK. And I know that we're getting more Monsterverse movies in the near future, so now I wouldn't mind focusing on Godzilla and let King Kong relax with his new family. You can make another interesting story about how the world has lost faith in Godzilla, which could lead to others attempting to replicate what Apex had tried to do and kill Godzilla once and for all. For now, The New Empire is a great addition to the Monsterverse and is a great send-off from Adam Wingard. Is it controversial to say that Kong in this movie is a more gripping character compared to the Peter Jackson one? Although I love them both respectively, Skull Island feels like a fresh start to the King Kong character, where he becomes more of a protector than a misunderstood creature who is the last of his species. Its Full Metal Jacket meets the Monsterverse, as this movie has some amazing visual shots, and the allegory of the pointlessness of the Vietnam War is evident throughout this movie. The cast of characters in this movie is really crazy considering that this is peak MCU. We have Loki, Captain Marvel, Frozone, Sully, and even Dr. Dre and Eazy-E starring in this movie. You ever watch Straight Outta Compton? I liked it. It was a pretty good movie. I do have to mention that upon watching Monarch Legacy of Monsters, seeing how Bill Randa turned into John Goodman is so mind-boggling considering what it should be a couple of years after they lost Kurt Russell according to the timeline. Losing two baddies in a few years really hit John Goodman hard. But the real star of the show is Kong and Samuel L. Jackson. Samuel L. Jackson is phenomenal in this film and really steals the show as the crazy Lieutenant Colonel Preston Puckard. Another performance I also have to give flowers for before I get to Kong himself is John C. Reilly as Hank Marlowe, a World War II veteran who had been trapped on this island for decades. And his performance in this film is pretty good and is another standout of this film. Now let's talk about the star of the show, Kong. In this film, they reinvent the wheel when it comes to how King Kong is normally perceived. Although still misunderstood, he is seen more as a benevolent protector and wants to protect the things he cares about, which carries over for the next two Kong films. Director Jordan Vogt Roberts made a MonsterVerse film that could honestly stand on its own when it comes to big budget monster films. It's that good. The monsters of Skull Island are all whimsical and fantastic and makes for an intense battle of survival for the cast, and I don't mind the skull crawlers instead of the usual dinosaurs we get, as Kong is much bigger in this film than his usual size due to preparing Kong to take more weight on to fight Godzilla in the near future. Personally, I would have gone with Gorosaurus as a big bad villain, but who am I to say? I'm just a random person on the internet ranking King Kong movies. Regardless, Skull Island is a blast from start to finish. A must watch for any new MonsterVerse fan.
Fighter pilot! Dive bomb! And there comes a giant fish!
No!
You all saw this coming. Let's be real here, although I prefer Kong as a character in movies like Skull Island or The New Empire, none of those movies could quite compare to the spectacle that is the original. Willis O'Brien's stop motion is simply phenomenal in this movie. The monsters of Skull Island are majestic and almost feel otherworldly. Dinosaurs stuck in a time bubble, unaffected by the changing world. Skull Island is packed to the brim with mystery and fantasy that captivates the audience. King Kong is also technologically advanced with the way they're able to splice the scenes together with the human characters and the stop motion creatures. For 1933, it's actually really amazing. Carl Denham is probably the highlight of the human casting. Armstrong shines as a charismatic, shifty director on the search for the next big break, as they set sail to Skull Island to film a movie that can make his name immortal. The rest of the cast is pretty forgettable, as Jack Driscoll is a pretty boring misogynist sailor played by Bruce Cabot, and Ann Darrow, played by Fay Wray, doesn't provide much in this film, but that's honestly not her fault. Also, one thing I never noticed was Carl gets a map from a dude in Singapore, and I believe the 1976 movie starts with the ship sailing out of Singapore to Skull Island. So I thought that was a neat connection that helps connect the 1976 remake to the original, and upon rewatch, I never made the connection. Some stuff from the film doesn't age well at all, but that's part of the time capsule, so keep that in mind when watching the film. Denham and the crew's invasion of unspoiled land leads to the natives kidnapping Anne and making her the new Bride of Kong. Unlike the 1976 movie, the highlight of King Kong is the escapades through Skull Island. The different creatures, either attacking the crew or King Kong, make for some gripping scenes that keep your eyes glued to the screen. This movie defined the giant monster genre. It will go on to inspire countless iconic monsters, but everyone will always remember the one that started it all. And that's why King Kong is still one of the most iconic monster movies ever made. Long live the eighth wonder of the world.